So I thought I'd talk tonight about queer joy and queer suffering because I feel like a lot of us are suffering right now. Maybe, maybe not. Don't know. Different levels of suffering. So the Buddha taught us 2,600 years ago that life is inherently filled with suffering, and not much has changed since then. Unfortunately, there's 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows, and they're still always cycling through. So you can say it's a negative look in life, it's a pessimistic look, but it's also realistic. There's like so much challenge right now with the news and what's happening to the south of the border. But the good news, hopefully, all these things are impermanent. Let's hope so. So today we're going to talk about suffering for queers, especially, because that's us. So we suffer, that's a fact. And maybe we suffer more or less than heterosexuals, who's to say? We have unique forms of suffering because of the way society is with us sometimes. I think a lot of us right now are suffering with social media. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe some people have non-smartphones, but I think most of us have smartphones. And that social media like impacts our body and our suffering. There's also rejection maybe from family, from like maybe there's judgment from family. And sometimes there's sometimes there's no words and no actions and no judgments, but it's just a vibe against queers. And you can just kind of feel it when you enter a space or something like that. And then of course there's actual violence, harassment, and then those tiny microaggressions. And we get this in different ways according to like who we are, our gender and race and ability and so many things. And then there can be discrimination within our workplaces, systemic barriers, and legal stuff as well. And there's also that constant vigilance that happens like as we move through the world, like we're just always like slightly braced in new situations because we're like navigating a heteronormative world, you know, where we live in minority, and that can be super exhausting. And all these pains is the first arrow. Has everyone heard about the first and the second arrow? A little bit. So the first arrow is like the first arrow that shoots you is these pains, like, you know, the things that Trump says about you is the first arrow. And then the second arrow is how we react. So it's like the second arrow, we actually arrow ourselves. Does that make sense? Mm. I mean, you can say it in different, like we shoot ourselves. So it's like the fact that we might start to blame ourselves internally for other people's actions and attitudes towards us. And then this can make us feel despair and hopelessness, and grief, and all these things that we feel. We might take in what they're telling us, that we are unworthy of love and care and respect. And then there's a lot of anger there, right? The way we're treated, and that anger can get turned inwards again towards ourselves with that second arrow. And then we can start to criticize ourselves, or we can also be mean to fellow queers or fellow people. And then some of us consciously or unconsciously practice horizontal hostility, which is like so sad in our communities when we start to go against our own communities. And then we can internalize this homophobia and transphobia and think that we aren't worthy of dignity. You know, we can forget who we truly are, like as queer people, like shining our light as the weird queerdos we are. And sometimes the second arrow that we do to ourselves can be worse than the first arrow, if that makes sense. Like the first arrow is bad, but then we just keep doing it to ourselves. And has anyone heard of the Eightfold Path? So I'll just go into two of them, but there's like a way actually to relieve suffering. I mean, there's many things somatically we can do to relieve suffering, but there's the Eightfold Path. And the Buddha laid this out super clearly, like so many thousands of years ago. So I'll just mention two: right speech. So right speech is like when you communicate honestly, respectfully, you avoid gossip, you don't use unskillful language that hurts other people. And of course, some of us love gossip. So, I mean, not all of you, but I have had some gossip problems in my past. So we need to be mindful about this. And like when you gossip or when you say something dishonestly, how does that feel in the body? And only you can know. And like Buddha always said, like, you have to figure it out for yourself. Like, I can't tell you, like, Pascal can't tell you, whoever your teacher is can't tell you. You have to figure it out for yourself. Like, how does that speech feel in your body somatically? And then the other thing of the Eightfold Path I'll talk about is right action. And I think, so many of us are working towards social justice, like Camille and Theo doing the prison project. That if you want to know more about that, we can talk about that later. But, so many of us have been going to so many demos and doing all sorts of different work all across the city and the world. And that's right action, right? We're doing the things that are leading to a better world. Well, trying, and how can our actions align with our spirituality and also with compassion to others, but also to ourselves, because we can burn out. And I think many of us have been there, going too far with that. So there's like compassion to others, compassion to ourselves. And then for those of you who love somatics, I know there's some of you in the room, there's like the present moment, like, that can stop the arrow, is being with the breath, being with the sound, like being with your anchors of Buddhism, but also like orienting, like just looking around this space now, like, do you see anything you like, and just like, I see this quilt, maybe, like, you can let your eyes rest on something really nice, something pleasant, and interrupt the second arrow. Like, as queers, we have a right to pleasure in our nervous systems. We have we deserve to create these neural pathways towards pleasure and joy. And then there's often things like small things we can do, like those of you at home, you can do nice things because you're at home, but I don't know, like if you have your blankets, like soft things, soft clothes, soft pillows, just creating, like if you're at home doom scrolling, just like moving your position, like making yourself comfortable, like just doing anything to interrupt the second arrow. Some people use music. Music can be really helpful, bring joy. And also like just being here together, being anywhere with queers together, like, like Andrea's class, or like different workshops we go to, like the Queer Birders, like there's so many groups in Montreal to be a part of, like the Radical Fairies, or whoever you want to hang out with, like just coming together, like brings us into co-regulation and minimizes our suffering a little bit. And then what are you doing for self-care? Are you prioritizing rest and relaxation? Is your pets helping you with this? Like, what do you do for rest and relaxation? Also, setting boundaries is really hard for some of us, but when you create boundaries, you have more space for joy, like creating boundaries around activism, family, work, social media, news, like limiting exposure by making boundaries with yourself. And it's obviously easier said than done because it draws us in, and it's, so much money has been made to make it draw us in. We all know this, but we need to protect our energy. and keep building these spaces of joy in our community. Like someone was talking to me yesterday about the queer life drawing class. Like there's just so many spaces that we could be a part of, like Sacred Harp or whatever we do. And feel free to put some stuff that you're a part of in the chat if you like. Because there's so many different groups. But yeah, our queerness can be a source of strength, resilience. We have a special kind of like upekkha or like equanimity because we see things in it like from the outside in a different way. And we also have the choice as queers to live differently, to live in different like love structures, different family structures, different living situations. I feel like there's a lot of childless cat ladies or cat humans in our group. There's also like queer family. Like there's just so many ways to be queer, and we do it in pretty joyous ways. Not imperfectly, but we're always finding new ways. So yeah, what else do I have to say here? During this time of like doom scrolling and sadness to the south, like we can always realign and pivot back to joy in small ways. Like it doesn't have to be like huge things. Like we don't have to do a big vacation or something. It can be tiny things, and we can build this joy like in tiny increments over time. And we can do this like by ourselves. We can do this, you know, with a lover, friends. We can do this in groups with our kids. And this joy can like be contagious. And wherever like we put our attention, you know, that grows. But if we put our attention to like what's happening in the South, like, okay, we need awareness, but we can also build another world full of mutual aid. And also there's pleasure, you know, and as long as it doesn't harm ourselves or others, we can enjoy pleasure. So that's all I have to say, but I'm going to open it up for discussion after. But I thought we'd sit and then do the compassion. Does that sound okay? Okay, I'll stop the recording.